welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 FM. I'm Paul Kretschmer. On today and tomorrow's broadcast, we'll be looking at temper and how it creates abusive situations in relationships, whether boyfriend-girlfriend or in marriage. As I understand it, the name that you are using is not your own, but it's rather a pseudonym to provide some privacy for anyone who's involved in your life, including yourself. Is that right?
Yes.
When did you first discover that you had a problem, or when did someone perhaps point it out to you and cause things to change for you dramatically from where the path you've been leading up to that point?
You know, that was those are kind of two different time frames. Probably the first time I realized that I had a problem, I was going through a divorce with my kid's mom. This is my first marriage. And as tensions escalated with, what that divorce settlement was going to look like, I ended up striking my wife. And I didn't get into any legal trouble, but my divorce attorney said, you can get into a lot of trouble for that. And my thought was, really? Wow, that surprises me. And I started looking into what was domestic violence and what I had done, and then realized that that is wrong, and I certainly don't want to get into trouble. But it wasn't really until a few years later when I was married to my second wife, and then we had some escalating conflict, and she pointed out the same thing, and I knew she was right. But I didn't really know what to do about that. I just found myself in those situations where we were having conflict, it would escalate, I would lose control of my temper, and I would end up saying or worse, doing things that were, fit the definition of domestic violence. And so, at that point I was highly motivated to try to figure out what was causing my behavior, but that information was really difficult to find.
Did you find yourself in a circumstance, for instance, where you recognized that things happened in the society around you, but you didn't necessarily equate those events with something that you yourself might be doing?
Yeah, I think I had this image of domestic violence as being, this person who, comes home and drinks a few beers and watches TV and then beats his wife up for burning the dinner. And that wasn't me. I didn't see myself like that at all. And really discovering that it's, any action, but certainly anything physical of hitting or unwanted touch fits that definition of domestic violence was eye-opening to me. And then also to understand the damage that does in a relationship. The fear that it creates, especially for the person who's smaller or weaker, but really for anyone, the threat of a violent reaction just does not make for a good partnership. So that revelation, kind of came to me slowly, and what seemed somewhat normal, I became aware and started to understand that no, that was really pretty harmful.
As you arrived at that point then, did that sensitize you to watching yourself more carefully when you were able to, before you passed the point of no return and started lashing out? Or was that something that you recognized but you didn't know how to respond to it unless you actually went somewhere to qualify people who could help you through a regimen that covered a period of time?
Paul, it was really the second one. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I was watching myself very closely, but, still found myself getting caught up in those situations and in those moments where, I would just react to the situation and end up doing something I knew was wrong, I knew I was going to get into trouble for. And that's really when I got motivated to, do some research and try to figure out why I was doing this. And I didn't find a lot of helpful information out there. Unfortunately, I was working with a pretty good counselor at the time, And also, very fortunately for me, I started going to church and heard this message that regardless of who we are and what we've done, God loves us. And the combination of, learning that from my counselor that most of my reactions were from this unanswered question of, am I lovable? And hearing at church that God loves me and that love is unconditional really started to help me put together an understanding of what was driving my strong abusive reactions and having a good answer for it.
Mm-hmm. Have you classified for yourself, or have you professionally classified a difference between verbal and physical abuse?
There's a pretty good classification. It's all abuse. Anything that's damaging to our partner, that's abuse. Mm-hmm. And so that could be in the form of verbal, meaning the words that we say. It could be emotional with, doing excessive control. And so both verbal and, excessive control or gaslighting or stonewalling are all kind of emotional abuse. Physical abuse certainly is equated with violence, and that's that unwanted touching. That's the piece of abuse that is illegal. It's not necessarily more or less damaging, but it's the piece that is illegal here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. As far as your response to what you were discovering about yourself, especially early on, were you ever tempted to take the route of, well, I had a hard life growing up, and that's just the way I am, so that you're going to have to adjust to the way I am?
I didn't take that position. I think, you look around and you see that this is not something that's part of every relationship or most relationships. And so for me, there was that realization that it really is something, I'm not sure what about me is driving this, but it's something that I need to figure out where it's coming from, and I need to figure out how to fix it.
Mm-hmm. In the time that you've been helping other people, have you discovered that in some cases the way an individual responds is tied directly or indirectly to the way they were raised, so that whether it's an appropriate response or not, it is a response that's been learned, and so therefore a person kind of drops into that groove and replicates it?
Yes, absolutely. That example and the role models that we had, I saw domestic violence in my home growing up. Not a lot, but I saw some. But really, we can see this in movies and on television. And so even if it's not in our home, we've been imprinted with that message that is at least a reaction that we can take. And in the heat of the moment, then our brain is looking for solutions, and it's trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? All of that happens very quickly at a subconscious level, but it happens nonetheless. I would just expand on what you said a little bit further, Paul, and say a lot of times we do go back to our families of origin, and we discover that there are hurts and wounds that have happened earlier in our years of fears of abandonment or abuse or neglect or excessively harsh treatment that end up driving the behavior later in life. And so this really does have its roots back in our families of origin and our upbringing.
Once again, my guest is Michael Clark today and tomorrow to talk about abusive behavior. For further information, call us at 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Paul Kretschmer on the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from WIHS.